Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another Friday night live stream. I'm Rod Saunders from Jew and Greek, and this is Friday, May the 29th in the year of our Lord 2026. And tonight we're going to be discussing Gen Z, also known as Zoomers. You may have heard that Gen Z or Gen Zers are returning to church in numbers greater than their parents. And I did a little research into that this week, and this is part of what I want to share with you tonight because I think that there are things that we can learn from this, and there are ways that we can take this trend and encourage people to continue in the faith, encourage some of the prior generation, the Gen Xers, and maybe even some boomers like me to come back to church as well. So I've got some clips I'm going to show you, and I'm going to get into a little bit of intelligent design because I think that is one reason that people are coming back to church, as well as some other more practical and I guess just humanity based reasons. Just humans by nature need relationships, they need community, they need purpose. We're going to get into all of that tonight. So let's see. We don't have too many people here, but a few are dragging in on this warm. Oh, it's almost summer now. Wow. On this warm late spring evening. Let's see. There's Tattered Bible Podcast. Good to see you. He paid in full, 49. Kimball, as always, Kimball's a very faithful viewer. I appreciate you, Kimball. And Brother John Elving was here before we got started. I don't know if he's still here now or not, but welcome, Brother John. There's Kendra. Thank you for letting me know that you're there, Kendra. You're supposed to say, tell me where you're watching from, because that gets people commenting. You know, I don't usually do that, but if you want to tell everybody where you're watching from and how you found out about my channel, leave that in the comment section, because the more you comment, the more it feeds the algorithm and the higher I get bumped up in the search engine rankings. So, here we go. Iowa. Thank you, Kendra. And Fort Wayne, Indiana. Good to know that. Never been. I went through Indiana one time. I don't think I stopped. My sister lives in Indiana, but I've never been up there to visit her. And of course, Tattered Bible Podcast. I believe you're in Cape Girardeau, Rush Limbaugh's hometown. Greetings from Dixie. Okay, so you're not going to say specifically where in Dixie. Okay, that's fine. I'm from Dixie too. I was born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Lived there till I was 5 years old. And then we moved to God's country in Texas. I grew up in Texas. Proud to be a Texan. Nothing against Arkansas, but I'd much rather be from Texas. Ava Greenfeather, good to see you. Okay, so let's get into this. If you don't know, Gen Z are people who were born between 1997 and, let's see, 2012, I believe it is. So about a 15-year period there are Gen Zers. So if you were born in 1997, you'd be turning 29 this year. So basically, people in their late teens and 20s are Gen Zers. And Gen X, I guess, is like, well, let's see. Now there's millennials, and then there's Gen X. So I guess the millennials are the next group up. And then, boy, I'm really feeling old now. You got to get Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, who are middle-aged people, and then the boomers, who were born between 40 and 64. and I was born in 57. So you take 7 years off of that. I guess the youngest you would be as a boomer is 62. So anyway, but that's Generation Z, and these are people who grew up with the internet, and they're just used to doing things online. It's just that's just normal life for them. People like me, we had to learn how to use computers. We had to, I remember when first time I ever got on the internet, I think was back in 94, 95. They called it the information superhighway, and you had dial-up connections, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was brand new to computers. I did not understand that data could be transferred through the phone lines and all of that. I had an IBM PS1, and somebody told me they were on that PS stands for a piece of crap. I didn't know. I had a grand total of 4 meg of RAM. I remember I had 4 meg of RAM and 129 meg of storage on my hard drive. And I thought I was in business. But I had to learn. Everything I know about computers, I've learned in the last 30 years when I was in my late 30s. So I didn't grow up with computers or the internet in the digital age. My generation, we had to learn all this stuff later in life, and some my age never did. All they can do is log on and check their email and maybe do a search or two. A lot of them never bothered to use social media. I've never had anybody that I grew up with contact me and say, I saw you on YouTube. Because they don't, most people my age don't watch YouTube. They might see a video every once in a while about something in the news or maybe a sports recap or something like that. But my generation grew up watching the television and listening to the radio. And most of them never really ventured out much beyond that. So anyway, there are some unique things about Gen Zers because they grew up in the information age. They don't date the way that people from my generation dated. Where you meet a girl, you get her phone number, and then you call her up and you ask her out. You go by and you pick her up, you take her to a restaurant or whatever. This generation, they don't do things that way. From what I understand, okay? It's been a long time since I was that age, but from what I understand, relationships now are established online. You meet somebody online, and after you get comfortable with them, then maybe you meet in person, or maybe you don't. You check out their profile, and you Google them, find out as much as you can about them before you decide if you want to meet them in person. Interesting how things have changed. And that's if you're not into all the nasty stuff. If you're into Grindr and Tinder and all of that stuff, God only knows how they pursue relationships. But there's a lot of people that they're not into the bar scene. They're not necessarily religious people, but they're not into the bar scene. They're not into drugs. They spend a lot of their time just playing Call of Duty or just surfing the web, and they don't have a whole lot of friends. They don't have relationships. This is becoming a very isolated generation, but many of them have decided, I don't want to stay home and just surf the web all the time. I need friends. I need community. And so that's one thing that they're looking for in Gen Z is they're looking for actual human interaction that they don't get online. And the church gives them that. Now, you can find that in other places like, some social club, a book reading club, or people who are interested in the arts, or people who are interested in, music. They'll have like we used to have what were called special interest groups, SIGs, special interest groups, where you'd put it on Facebook, or back then, I guess it was, what was the name of that? Before Facebook, it was MySpace. I don't know if you guys remember MySpace or not, but MySpace, a lot of times there would be these community meetups that people would announce, and they would all get together to discuss poetry or French cooking or whatever. And they would meet people in their hometown that had common interests. If you can find community that way, great. But a lot of people, they don't have any interest like that, and they're looking for something with a little more meaning, a little more depth than French cooking or poetry, and so they look to the church for community, and they find a sense of belonging by coming to the church, where their parents didn't do it that way. And many of them actually have to sneak out of the house to go to church because they grew up in secular homes where their parents told them, don't go to church. Religion is, a bunch of garbage. And we don't go to church. We don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster. So they tell the kids, and then the kids have to become rebellious and sneak out of the house to go to church on Wednesday night or Sunday morning or whatever. So that's one thing, is loneliness drives many Gen Zers to church because they want a sense of family and community. Another thing is a sense of purpose. Humans need meaning and purpose in their lives. A lot of times you'll see people that are older that have made a lot of money, not necessarily old, but just, they've gotten up into their 30s and 40s and 50s. They've become very successful, very wealthy, maybe professional athletes or actors or somebody, and they've made $100 million. They got all the money they would ever need, but they still need to work. They don't need the money. Why? You like Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley, both retired from the NBA, but they're always working. They do their commentary for the NBA, and they're doing commercials. They show up at different events, but they're always doing something. Why? They don't have to work. They've got all the money they could ever spend, but they need that sense of purpose. They need something to do, to feel like they're not just sitting around vegetating. And you'll find a lot of times that people who start a company and they make, just they're absolutely what they call filthy, sneaking rich. They really become multi, 100, 200, $500 million billionaires, whatever. The Jeff Bezos types. And they keep working. And I used to think, why do you keep working? You got all that money. You could do anything you want to. You could travel the world, see the wonders of the world, but you still put in 60 hours a week working? Why does Elon Musk have to work as much as he does? He's the richest man in the world because he's driven by a sense of purpose. People need purpose and meaning in life. And Gen Zers are looking for meaning, and they don't find meaning in the secular worldview that says basically that we're all just we're here by random chance. We're just an accident of the universe, and we're here for a while and we're gone and we're dead like a dog. Well, where's the meaning in life from a worldview like that? So some people are thinking, maybe there is more to life than what I've been taught in this secular world, in the university where I went to, where I had an atheist professor, mocking religion. Many of them are starting to question authority figures that present them with a secular worldview. And it's partly because they have a natural sense that life has to have some kind of meaning. And they're looking for meaning in church that they don't find outside of church. And then there are other people, Gen Zers, not just Gen Zers, a lot of people are coming back to church, but especially Gen Z, because of the internet, they have access to all kinds of information now that we didn't have access to 20, 30 years ago. And I'm going to get into a few clips here because a lot of people had just been told evolution is settled science. Okay, and if you question evolution, you're just a hillbilly. You're just an ignorant SOB. You don't know nothing about nothing. And the worldview promoted in that culture, a lot of people in the Gen Z world have found out it's not necessarily settled science. Evolution has problems. There are things about evolution that don't work. But we've been told that evolution is settled science because we don't want people looking into it to find out that there are problems in neo-Darwinism. So the first clip I'm going to show you here is from, let me pull it up. This is Dr. Stephen Meyer from the from the Discovery Institute, talking about DNA.
In 1957, Francis Crick first proposed that chemicals called bases along the spine of the DNA molecule function as alphabetic characters in a written language or digital characters in a machine code. This animation shows how this digital information directs protein synthesis. First, a large protein complex separates the tightly wound strands of the DNA to prepare it to be copied. During this process of transcription, a protein complex called a polymerase produces a single-stranded copy of the original instructions. Here we see this copy, a messenger RNA molecule, being constructed inside the polymerase as individual bases are positioned and added to the growing strand. Now we see the polymerase in action from the outside as it spits out the messenger RNA transcript. Next, this RNA transcript approaches and passes through a molecular machine called the nuclear pore complex, an information recognition device that controls the flow of information in and out of the cell's nucleus. Now we see the genetic assembly instructions on the messenger RNA approaching and arriving at a two-part chemical factory called a ribosome, the site of protein synthesis. As the messenger RNA transcript passes through the ribosome, the process of translation begins. During translation, a mechanical assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids in accord with the instructions on the transcript. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cell by molecules called transfer RNAs, which link specific sequences of bases to corresponding amino acids. The sequential arrangement of the amino acids determines the type of protein constructed. When the construction of the chain is complete, it is transported to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape required to perform its function.
Now that animation, I think, is from about 12 years ago. And it's basically showing you about the information processing environment and the protein manufacturing environment inside every cell in your body. 14 trillion cells. I believe humans have about 14 trillion cells in their body. Every cell, this is going on to transfer information because the cells die off and they have to reproduce. Prior generations didn't have animations like this. I never saw anything like this until I was in my upper 50s. And I was a theistic evolutionist. I was told evolution was settled science, and I just bought it. I didn't actually study the theory of evolution and natural selection. I didn't study DNA. I didn't know anything about molecular machines and the intricate environment inside every cell. I didn't know anything about this. But this information is out there for anybody now, easily accessible. And people who grow up with this kind of information, they see this and they say, where did that information come from? Darwinian evolution can't explain that, where the information came from. And Michael Behe, actually, on one of the clips I'm going to show you here, Michael Behe was a molecular biologist and an evolutionist. And he started asking some of these questions, and nobody seemed to have any answers. And he just thought, well, somebody will figure it out. So let's go on to the next clip here. Oh, this is Michael Behe talking about bugs.
Nothing we humans have ever built even comes close. In fact, a growing field of engineering called biomimetics is making breakthroughs by mimicking biology. For example, studying the eyes of flies led to the development of advanced optical sensors. The physics of dragonfly wings allowed increased efficiency of wind turbines. Cockroach mechanics paved the way for increased agility in robots. A honeybee algorithm helped to optimize the internet. And the tiny plant hopper is helping scientists to maximize the strength and rotation of gears. Those perfectly precise, interconnected drivers that have transformed machinery for centuries. Well, it turns out that biology is far ahead of our engineering. The plant hopper launches like a rocket and can jump more than 100 times its body length. That's like an Olympic long jumper hurtling across not one, but 2 football fields. Using special cameras, scientists at Cambridge University discovered that the plant hopper coordinates the motion of its legs with these incredibly precise gears. Making long leaps accurately requires that the legs be in perfect sync. If one leg flexed even a fraction of a millisecond before the other, the insect would lose power and tumble erratically. As one leg begins to move, the interacting gears start the other leg too. With the teeth engaged, the gears spin at a whopping 50,000 teeth per second, and the bug is propelled with maximum power and coordination.
Now that's engineering. And we're led to believe that everything in evolution happened by random chance. It was not a guided, directed process, but it just happened randomly over a period of millions and billions of years. Well, people that grow up watching this, a lot of them are saying, I don't buy it. I don't buy that natural processes, wind, rain, erosion, radiation, can do that. That's engineering. And engineering requires forethought. So as people look at this, they say, maybe I haven't got the whole story on evolution. Maybe I've been sold a bill of goods here. It's hard for people to watch stuff like this and still buy into everything that evolutionists are saying. And this is, I think, one contributing factor. It's not just one reason that Gen Z, people from Generation Z are going back to church. There are a number of reasons. Like I said, community, purpose, but also they're asking these big picture questions about where did we come from? How did we get here? And does life have any meaning and purpose? If we were designed and created, then we must have some purpose. And it sure looks like we were designed and created with forethought rather than getting here by random chance. So on to the next clip now. This is also Michael Behe talking about the cell.
Every living thing in the world is made of cells. Microbes are single-celled organisms. Advanced life forms have trillions of cells. Inside a cell is a bustling operation of interconnected molecular machinery so sophisticated it would put any modern high-tech factory to shame. This intricate machinery is what gives the cell its remarkable abilities to process energy, execute genetic instructions, and replicate, all with unbelievable efficiency. My own view of the cell took a turn years ago. I was in a lab at the National Institutes of Health doing postdoctoral research. I was discussing the origin of life with a fellow postdoc. As she and I thought about the cell, we wondered, how could its complex membrane, proteins, metabolism, genetic code, how could all that have formed by the accumulation of undirected changes? So we were both sort of stunned by the notion, but then we just laughed it off. We figured that even if we didn't know the answer, somebody must know. Well, in the 10 years after that, I didn't come across any science publications that adequately answered the nagging question, exactly how did the cell get to be so complex? Everything I read presumed that those biological mysteries would eventually be solved by Darwin's theory of evolution. Then I came across a book titled Evolution, a Theory in Crisis by a geneticist, Michael Denton. It addressed profound problems with Darwin's theory, and it showed that science didn't have the answers.
Evolution, a Theory in Crisis. After I heard Michael B. talking about this, I got a copy of it. I haven't finished it yet. I'm not a scientist, and a lot of this stuff is kind of hard for me to grasp and process. But it is interesting how somebody with that background as a geneticist is starting to say, wait a minute, this doesn't work. What we've been taught all these years, it's just not holding up. And many people in the scientific community who were evolutionists. And now Michael Denton, from what I understand, he was not even religious. But he was just a geneticist that was looking at this, and he's saying, hey, this doesn't work. Now, Michael B. is a Catholic, but most Catholics don't have any problem with evolution. He didn't have any problem with it until he started asking some of these questions that were nagging at him, and he got that book, and he says, well, wait a minute, this guy is addressing these issues that I've been asking for 10 years. So on to the next clip here. This is also Michael Behe talking about irreducible complexity.
You and I are made of about 40 trillion cells. They comprise every part of our complex human anatomy. But the truth is that we can reduce the number of parts and still have function. If we lost an eye, an ear, or a hand, it would be very unfortunate, but our lives could go on. The complexity of this machine entails 5 parts: the platform, the spring, the hammer, the holding bar, and the catch. If I take away the holding bar, or the spring, or any other part, it wouldn't work. Every part is essential. I call this irreducible complexity. Here's a bacterium, a single-cell microbe. Some bacteria have a flagellum, which is like an outboard motor on a boat. It rotates to propel bacteria through liquid, and it's necessary for their survival in order to swim to search for food. A flagellum has a number of parts: a drive shaft, a universal joint, a rotor, bushings, stator, even a clutch and braking system. The motor of the flagellum has been clocked at 100,000 revolutions per minute. And as with the mousetrap, removing even one component of this elegant machine destroys its function and renders the bacterium, shall we say, dead in the water. Now we know that this was assembled in a factory, but how is the bacterial flagellum developed in nature? Keep in mind, the flagellum is irreducibly complex.
So what he's showing you there is that the bacterial flagellar is irreducibly complex, which means you take one part away from it and it doesn't work. How does that come together through the process of evolution? Evolution doesn't build anything. Evolution does adaptation to what already exists, but it doesn't build it. And if one of those parts was missing, it wouldn't be able to move around inside of the cell. So you start off with something that is functional. It doesn't become functional. It doesn't start off non-functional and then become functional. It starts off that way. And evolution can't do that. Natural selection, I should say, can't do that. Natural selection changes or adapts to over a long period of time through mutations. That's the point that he's making here, is this neo-Darwinism can't really account for irreducible complexity in functioning parts of an organism. On to the next clip. Here he's let's see. Oh, this is a TED talk. This is fascinating. When I saw this, this is how stuff is moved around inside the cell. When you got these little guys that are broadcasting signals that the proteins are ready for transport or whatever.
We've been studying this thing called the kinetochore for over 100 years with intense study, and we're still just beginning to discover what it's all about. It is made up of about 200 different types of proteins, thousands of proteins in total. It is a signal broadcasting system. It broadcasts through chemical signals, telling the rest of the cell when it's ready, when it feels that everything is aligned and ready to go for the separation of the chromosomes. It is able to couple onto the growing and shrinking microtubules. It's involved with the growing of the microtubules, and it's able to transiently couple onto them. It's also a tension sensing system. It's able to feel when the cell is ready, when the chromosome is correctly positioned. It's turning green here because it feels that everything is just right. And you'll see that there's one little last bit that's still remaining red. And it's walked away down the microtubules. That is the signal broadcasting system sending out the stop signal, and it's walked away. I mean, it's that mechanical. It's molecular clockwork. This is how you work at the molecular scale. So with a little bit of molecular eye candy, we've got kinesins, which are the orange ones. They're little molecular courier molecules walking one way. And here are the dynein. They're carrying that broadcasting system, and they've got their long legs so they can step around obstacles and so on. So again, this is all derived accurately from the science. The problem is we can't show it to you any other way.
Yeah, they can't really videotape that because it is on such a small nanotechnology level. But through their science, they're able to detect that this is how it happens. And so they have to show you through an animation because they can't actually videotape it. I don't understand the process. I take his word for it. This guy, this is a TED Talk. This is not a religious guy. This is just somebody explaining how the cell works. But I remember the first time I ever saw that, and I saw these little guys running back and forth on the microtubule. And I said, how does evolution and natural selection produce all of these guys that are transporting stuff and building the microtubules for transport? That doesn't look to me like just wind, rain, ocean, natural forces. That looks to me like engineering. And I made the statement before that the cell is more complex than any manufacturing facility man has ever created. There's information processing. There's well, they're not really forklifts, but they act like forklifts, moving stuff around. And you've got the bacterial flagellar with the outboard motor on it. And all of this stuff is going on the information copying, because DNA has to be copied all the time. It's copied over and over, just like a computer. When you transfer data from one computer to another, the operating system does error checking constantly to make sure that all the data gets transferred as it should. Well, that's the same kind of thing that goes on in the cell. As the information is transferred, there's error checking. It's fascinating. But how do you get this from Darwinian evolution? So back to Gen Zers. They grow up with access to all this information, and they're told that we're just here by random chance, and they see these animations and they're thinking, yeah, I don't buy it. I think more and more people are turning away from what they've been told about evolution under the age of 50. People over 50 have pretty much settled in their worldview. But the younger you get, the more malleable your mind is, and the more you question things. When I was young, we questioned lots of stuff. We questioned the war in Vietnam. We questioned if we were being told the truth about marijuana, because we were told, hey, if you smoke marijuana, you'll end up on heroin and cocaine. And, some people did, some people didn't. It wasn't really addictive. They called it a gateway drug, but a lot of the data was kind of fudged to discourage kids from doing drugs. And, I never did drugs, but I'm just saying, when you get lied to about stuff like that, then you wonder if you're being told the truth about anything. And young people today are questioning secularism. They're questioning evolution. Are you really giving me the whole story here? So I think that is a big part of why Gen Zers are returning to faith, is because they see maybe we were lied to. Okay. There's Marcus. Good to see you. My brother from another mother. Let's see. What do you say here? I missed. Survival of the fittest does not explain the arrival of the fittest. Yeah, Stephen Meyer from the Discovery Institute, he says that adaptation does not mean origin. The fact that you can adapt does not mean that you came about from nothing, or from chemicals, or wind, rain, erosion, just natural forces. The arrival of the fittest is never really addressed in Darwinian evolution. They just start with the assumption, okay, there was a single cell organism, and here's how everything happened from that point on. Well, how did we get that first single cell organism, that first microbe? Oh, we don't know. But it had to happen that way. Otherwise, our theory doesn't work. That kind of thing. So let's see. Was that everything that all the clips that I wanted to show? Yeah. So let me get back to my notes here. So yeah, I think that that's a big part of why Gen Zers are starting to return to faith, is because they're not buying into the secular view. They think they lied to about a lot of stuff. Another reason, I believe, is people like Charlie Kirk, who went on college campuses and started interacting with young people, discussing these ideas, discussing Christianity and the Bible and the worldview that he holds to as the Judeo-Christian worldview, being pro-life or anti-abortion, being pro-military and pro-democracy and pro-capitalism. And basically, Charlie Kirk said, I believe in Jesus. I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible. I think you need to follow Jesus, go to church, get married, and raise a family, and live life in a way that's consistent with Scripture. And he had a tremendous impact. He was kind of under the radar with a lot of people, but we're finding out now just how great an impact Charlie Kirk had. But he wasn't the only one. There are other people out there who are engaging young people on college campuses and trying to get them to think about some of these issues and not just buy into what they've been taught. And guess what? A lot of them, especially young men, started catching on. And this kind of stuff's been going on for years. I mean, Stefan Molyneux, one of the guys that I modeled my YouTube channel after Stefan Molyneux, he's a great communicator. He was out there years ago engaging people in debate. Freedom of speech is so important because it gives us the opportunity to give people a different perspective on things and make them think. And we used to encourage thinking on college campuses, but these days, a lot of people get in trouble for expressing a contrarian viewpoint, a contrarian worldview to secularism. And as I mentioned, some people, some professors have gotten in trouble for raising any of these issues about evolution and daring to think that intelligent design might be making some valid points. So anyway, but yeah, people like Charlie Kirk, who have been engaging young people, not as popular with women because they consider him to be a we used to call him male chauvinist pig. I don't know if people still use that expression now or not, but basically sexist. They considered Charlie Kirk sexist and homophobic and all of that stuff. And so he wasn't as popular with young women, but boy, he was popular with young men on college campuses. And he turned a lot of them away from the Democrat Party and helped Trump get elected in 2024. He also, I think, helped Trump get a lot of votes in 2020. But the 2020 election, that's a different video. But that's another factor in Gen Zers returning to church, is social media influencers who have been discussing these big picture issues for the last 10 years on college campuses. Now, you also got people out there saying Jesus is king. That's I never heard that when I was young, but you hear of Jesus is king all the time. Now, some of the people using Jesus as king, like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens, they're Catholics and they're anti-Semitic. And they're just using Jesus as king, not as an affirmation of their faith, but to antagonize people who don't believe in Jesus, like Orthodox Jews. And it's like the Apostle Paul said in Philippians 1:18. He says, "What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice, yes, and will rejoice." So Paul said, I don't care what the motives are. People are preaching Jesus, and I'm happy about that. And so we don't like the fact that people like Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes are using Jesus as king that way. But you know what? It gets people thinking. It gets people thinking about who is Jesus. And why do so many people say that? What is it that's so phenomenal about Jesus? Which leads me to another point. A lot of Gen Zers want to connect with something that's bigger than themselves. We just have a sense as human beings that there's something bigger. And a lot of the Gen Zers are not going to contemporary church services. They're going to mainstream denominational churches. They're going to churches that have a confession of faith from some creed. Your more contemporary churches, charismatic churches, we don't do a whole lot of recitation from creeds. But if you're going to a Lutheran church, Episcopal church, or a Reformed church, a lot of Gen Zers are going to Reformed churches, guys. Let's just acknowledge that. Or Eastern Orthodox churches or Catholic churches. A lot of them want a connection to history. And they don't see a connection to history from charismatics. Sorry to say that charismatics on TV don't give people a sense of a connection to the historic faith. But to a Catholic or Eastern Orthodox or somebody who's Reformed, who's talking about, Calvin or Spurgeon or Martin Luther or Augustine, they're talking about figures from the past that are in our history books. They have a sense of connection to history in some of these more mainstream denominational churches. But then you've got other people who have returned to church because they like the fog machines and the lights and the loud music. Life Church, the Greg Groeschel mega church. A lot of people like that environment. I've been to some of those churches. It's just too loud for me. But a lot of people, they like the contemporary worship. They like Hillsong or Bethel music or Elevation music. They want to sing those songs. They want to hear the electric guitars and the drum. They like that rock concert environment. So they're going back to church because there's something that connects with them culturally there with the music. So there's a number of reasons that people are from that age group are going back to church. It's not any one thing. But just as 20, 25 years ago, and with the, what they called them, I guess the four horsemen of atheism, Christopher Hitchens and the guy with the big ears, can't remember his name, and should have written it down. But there were these four atheists who were pushing new atheism. They wrote books, they were doing lectures, and they made a lot of progress for the secular worldview. And people were leaving church in droves 20, 25 years ago. In the earlier days of the internet, people listened to these guys and they turned away from the faith. Well, now just the opposite is happening. Now, instead of atheists being the big influencers, you got a ton of people out there talking about faith online. And that's why I encourage people. We need more charismatics creating content for the internet, because most of the Christian community that's promoting our worldview online, most aren't charismatics, and a lot of them, as you've seen, are kind of hostile toward charismatics and Word of Faith people like me. But that's a big part of it, is the presence of influencers that are promoting a Judeo-Christian biblical worldview. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover as far as why. Now let's talk about what we can do, because we want to encourage this. We want to encourage young people to keep going down this road, keep asking these questions. And just a few things that I've discovered that people need to know about Gen Zers is, for the most part, Gen Zers don't want performance. They want real. They want people who are real, who will tell them the truth. They don't necessarily want somebody to come out and do a sermon where they know that they're acting, they're putting on a show. Now, you do have some people who like the performance aspect, but for the most part, Gen Zers reject that. They want real. They want real connections with people. They want real community. They want real answers, real discussions. When they log on to your church's website, they don't want to see stuff that's not real, just stock images. They want real video clips from your church services. They don't care how polished it is. They just want something that's real, that they can connect with. And I'm told that also your website has to look good on a phone, because that's how they get their information, on their phones. And a lot of churches haven't really adapted to that. And if they look up your church website on the phone and they can't find the address, they're not going to show up. So we need to make sure that we're communicating with Gen Zers in a way that can connect. Show them something real. Don't show them something that's just manufactured, and give them the information they're looking for, the service times and how to get there, so that they don't have to hunt around for it. Make your website user-friendly for people who are looking, because that they're going to do it. Before they go to church, they will look up the church website and try to find out something about your church before they ever set foot in the door. So we've got to make sure that we're giving them the information. We got to give them what they're looking for as far as our online presence. Now, I'm not saying give them what they're looking for as far as the message, as far as the doctrine. We got to just teach people what the Bible says, the way that the Bible says it. You can't compromise truth, but you can adapt your presentation to what people are looking for. Just like the Apostle Paul tried to communicate to the Greeks in Athens based on things that they were familiar with. You got to be able to connect with people. You got to learn to speak their language. And so I encourage, if you're a church leader if you're somebody in a position of influence regarding your online presence, take these things into consideration. Do a little research on it and find out how you can engage people in that age group, because we want to encourage this. We want to keep more and more people, not just Gen Zers, but millennials and Gen Xers as well, and whatever the next generation is called. We want to make sure that we're connecting with people in an effective way and giving the like I said, you don't want to compromise truth, but you got to find out how you can connect with people and then connect with them with the truth. Okay, so wow. That's 51 minutes into the live stream, and I'm done. So let's go back and see who's here. Who else has come in? This would be good content if you changed your name to CDC, the Center for Disease Control. I don't know if that's what you're referring to or not. But what about Warner Gett and the information law? I don't know that name, Warner Gett. Proposed the law of information. Information comes from an information giver. That's kind of what Stephen Meyer says. The inference to the best explanation is the same principle that Darwin used in his theory. Stephen Meyer says that he uses inference to the best explanation in his reasoning, that where does information come from? It doesn't come from natural processes. It comes from a mind. So that's why they promote intelligent design, is that there's a lot of evidence that there was design and forethought into the creation of man. Not just the creation of man, but in the creation of the universe, because the universe is so finely tuned so as to support life that just if you just change one little thing in the force of gravity or electromagnetism or whatever, no galaxies, no star systems, no planets, no life. The universe is finely tuned to support life, and the earth is finely tuned to support life within a universe that is finely tuned to support life. But yeah, that's something Stephen Meyer has been promoting for years, that intelligence, information comes from a mind, and there is information in the cell in DNA. Let's see. Mark Lucero. I graduated Bible college with a rocket scientist and a brain surgeon. The rocket scientist would look through a telescope and see God's glory. The brain surgeon, through a microscope, see God's glory. Interesting. I've never known a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist. My brother-in-law used to, he's a physicist. He used to work with the Naval Weapons Testing Center, and that's in Las Cruces, New Mexico. That's about the closest I ever got to a rocket scientist, is somebody who was working with laser technology for. This was back in the 80s when Reagan was president, and they were doing strategic defense initiatives. People called it the Star Wars program, but they were trying to figure out how to shoot stuff down with lasers from space. And he was working on that. And of course, he couldn't talk about it a whole lot. It was top secret stuff, classified. Dennis Ormerod, good to see you, brother. And by the way, that the one, see, Mary Rutherford. I didn't say hi to you, but I appreciate you joining us tonight too. Let's see. Charlie Kirk preached to many thousands on campuses. Yeah, he did, and he did it for years. And he was becoming more and more popular. I mean, if you've seen the video clip from the day he was assassinated, it was just wall-to-wall people, which makes you wonder why they didn't have better security. He won many to Jesus. Yes, he did. And I don't know if we're ever going to have another Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's hard to replace somebody like that. He was a unique guy. It's kind of like Rush Limbaugh. Uh, Rush Limbaugh was a man of his time. When radio was really big, Rush Limbaugh got out there and he started promoting his political views on radio, and there was nobody like him, and nobody's ever been able to replace him. But we've got the internet now. When he first started doing that, the internet wasn't, or well, the World Wide Web wasn't really a thing. And so he used the technology of his day. And of course, Rush Limbaugh is gone now. And I don't think there's ever going to be anybody quite like Charlie Kirk. He was one of a kind. But you can have a lot of people who have a similar influence on a smaller scale, and it'll add up. Let's see. Busy Talks Now. I don't know what the greater and lesser than. I don't know what that is. That a fish? I'm guessing that's a fish, but good to see you. I wouldn't call Nick Fuentes and Owens Catholics. In my opinion, they use Catholicism as a shield or a gimmick. You know, you're probably right. But I do know that Candace Owens' husband is a Catholic because he debated Allie Beth Stuckey on Catholicism a few years ago. I watched that debate, and so I know her husband is Catholic, and I just assumed that that's why she converted to Catholicism, because her uber wealthy husband, you know, he was worth $150 million when she married him, and they never really dated. They just met, had a few phone calls, and he asked her to marry him, and she Googled his net worth and said, "You bet." That's my take on it. I think the pandemic and current economic struggles have devastated Gen Z, and they're searching for hope and structure. Yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it. COVID messed with a lot of people's worldviews. You know, a lot of people thought, hey, wait a minute, I think we're being lied to here. Candace Owens doesn't preach the word. She says Christ is king, but her heart is not for glorifying God, the word. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it. When she started off years ago, she didn't talk about religion much. I remember she spoke at Liberty University one time, and she talked a little bit about how she was raised in church. Her grandpa took her to church or whatever, and taught her the Bible and everything. But then she became a teenager, and she left the church, and she got off and became a wild, rebellious teenager. And then she got involved in politics, and at first she was a Democrat, and then eventually she became a Republican, conservative, whatever. And because she was so articulate, because she was such a good speaker, she came to the attention of people like, let's see, what is it? The guy, the Prager, Dennis Prager, and then eventually Charlie Kirk, and then Ben Shapiro, and now she's kind of burned her bridges with all of those people, and she's doing her Candace Owens, crazy Candace thing. But with that in mind, if the church fails to do that within the next 10 years, we might see a relapse. Time for the church to show people the power of the word. Amen. I'm not a scientist either. Charismatic Calvinist. Good to see you. As a new Christian, Reformed was rather cold and not much different, the people from the world. It was the charismatic church where I experienced warmth and love, which was refreshing. I appreciate you sharing that. There are charismatic churches that aren't that warm and loving, and there are Reformed churches that are more warm and loving. But I think, generally speaking, the Reformed churches have an identity problem. They have an image problem. They do come across as more harsh, mean. And I've heard them Some of them admit that. We got to do something about our image here. We come across as mean, and we shouldn't do that. So I think that some of them are working a little bit on the public relations for the Reformed world. And that's what some of the movies that I call propaganda, just basically Calvinist propaganda, masquerading as Christian apologetics. I think that's behind some of the movies. It's an effort to reshape their image very subtly. And unfortunately, they've been pretty effective with that. But I did a whole series of videos against American Gospel Christ alone to try to show people, you're not getting the whole story here from these guys. Finding out Candace Owens was a former video vixen was funny. Video vixen? I don't know what you mean by video vixen. I'm going to have to grab my dictionary and look up the definition of vixen. I think a vixen is a provocative woman. I don't know. I don't know how you're using that. So anyway, there's David Wireback. Have you heard what has been taking place in Stockton, California back on May 3rd? Mario Murillo bought his $5,000 seat tent and set it up in our church parking lot. The response has been so massive, especially from young people, that he has kept the turn up, and he's coming back for a third time here. June 14th to 17th, we have seen many miracles and many people coming to the Lord. We have been here in the streets of Stockton, bringing people to the Lord. We're praying to Stockton would become known as, I guess he's still writing. No, I haven't heard about that, David, but I'm glad to hear. I don't follow Mario Murillo that closely. He's not really an online influencer. His thing is doing stuff out there in the real world, not online. But he has, in recent years, especially during the pandemic, he spent a lot of time online, but he doesn't that much anymore. But that's a good report. We need to see stuff like that all over the country. I don't know about tents. If people are going to show up in tents, great. Buy a tent, put a tent up and do an outdoor meeting. But to me, it just seems odd that young people would want to go somewhere with a tent when you grow up with all the comforts of an air-conditioned building with nice seating capacity and all the accoutrements of modern churches. But hey, if that's what they want to do, great. Put up a tent. If you're getting results, God bless him. She was in music videos for underground rappers. I did not know that. Okay, I learned something tonight. Candace Owens was in music videos. Okay. He's coming for the third time, tent still up in our church parking lot. But a miracle where the skies opened up, and it was a huge open window where all the rest of the sky was cloudy, and you could see it from all over the city. We have pictures. You can go online. You can probably see a lot of stuff about it. Okay. Yeah, everybody look into that. Mario Murillo, Stockton, California, and see what's going on. I'm very hopeful for Gen Z. Me too. I have to admit, a few years ago, I was really down on young people. I'm a senior citizen, and I'm far removed from people in their late teens and early 20s. And, my attitude was basically, they don't even know how to make change. They can't do math in their heads. They're just not very smart and very capable people. But there's a lot of young people that are smart and capable and competent and well behaved. And I've met some of them online. And I want to encourage more and more people in their 20s to get out there, create content, hold meetings, whatever. Elijah Merle, that I've had on Well, see, I was on his channel once, and then I brought him on my channel once. I need to bring him back, but he's 29, I believe. He's right on the edge, Gen Zers. But I've met a few other Gen Zers. Evan DiDio, who helped me get my channel back after it was hijacked. Evan's like 21, 22, something like that. Very bright, capable young man. The guy running the International School of Word that I just did a video with, Matthew Foley, I think he's about 28. You know, so we have some very smart, capable young people that are very impressive. Davon Lee is another one that I met a few months ago when he came to, well, actually it was last year when he came to Tulsa. He works for Daystar. And I was really impressed with how much he knew about charismatic Word of Faith history. Even though he's a young man, I was telling him about stuff that happened 30, 40 years ago, and he was familiar with most of what I was telling him. So, yeah, I'm very hopeful for Generation Z as well. People will go where the power of the Lord is manifest. Yeah. Kenneth Hagin said that when he pastored for 12 years back in the 40s, he said people would come from all around to their church service because on Sunday nights, he said, people would tell me we had the best show in town because on Sunday morning, they would have more of an evangelistic message. And then on Sunday nights, they'd have a believers meeting and they would pray for the sick and they would operate in the gifts and so forth. And a lot of incredible things happened. Word got out and people started coming to his church on Sunday nights from all over because they would see the gifts of the Spirit in operation. They would see miracles. And people would tell him, you got the best show in town, Brother Hagin. What is the message of Mario preached to young people was that he said that many were told there is no future for them. There's really no hope. But Mario says that it's not true. God has a hope for them. Gen Z has responded. Amen. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Is they grow up with this worldview that there's no meaning and there's no purpose for their lives. And it's depressing. And then they hear somebody like Mario come along and say, that's not true. God does have a purpose for your life. There is meaning in life. You were created by God. You have purpose. You have meaning. You have value. And for some reason, there's something inside of people that comes alive when they hear that message. And that you're not just an accident of nature and evolution. So I'm going to have to check out Mario Murillo and see what he's up to. I'm hearing some good things about him here. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up a little bit early tonight. If you guys don't mind, I used to go between an hour and a half, and I've gone an hour and 8 minutes. And that used to be long, but the more I did this, the more time I was able to do this. I used to be exhausted after an hour, but now I've gotten to the point where I go an hour and a half. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate all of you joining me here tonight. Hope you got something out of this. If nothing else, just remember that Gen Zers are not the stupid, incompetent, known things that a lot of us have been led to believe. They're looking for meaning, and they're kind of bucking the system by questioning what they've been told about the meaning of life and why we're here. They're looking for community, they're looking for meaning, and we ought to encourage them in that. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next Friday night live stream. Have a blessed week. Good night.